So just as some background, I'm a male and currently 25. I'm still living within 15 miles of my old house. This happened when I was about 8 or 9, making my sister at the time 5 or 6. We lived in a quiet neighborhood that, once I grew up, I found out was actually part of a lower income part of town. We had some pretty wonderful neighbors though, and it was thanks to these guys that a lot of potentially negative situations were avoided. At the time, my dad was working an 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. job, and my mother was a secretary at a hospital, which meant during the day she was often at work. Usually my sister and I had a babysitter, but once I reached about 8 or 9, I began to be old enough to look out for us without one. Mind you, this was in the 90s, which certainly weren't safe, but were much safer than they are now. We also had the previously mentioned neighbors who generally did a good job of keeping an eye on us in our house. This particular incident was one of the first times I was charged to babysit my sister. She was in her high chair eating whatever my mom had left for us, when I got a knock on our front door. Now this was strange since we never got visitors on a regular basis other than the boy across the street who would want us to come out and play. He would usually just yell my name while knocking. I was young and naive and decided to open the door. There was a locked screen door beyond that, and I left that closed and locked. Outside was a middle-aged man. I hardly remember his facial features or even his body type. I remember his yellow shirt and dirty jeans. "Hi, can I help you?" I asked innocently. No alarm bell is going off yet. "Hey there. Are your parents home?" Alright. First alarm bell. My parents teaching me not to trust strangers rushed through my head, but I still didn't quite fully grasp the potential danger here. My mom went to the store. She'll be back any minute. A weird half-lie. I could have said she was here but in the shower, or that she was laying down upstairs. I'm glad I didn't tell them that she wouldn't be back for quite a few hours, but looking back, it's scary how naive I was. Well, that's no problem. Hey, so look, my dog just went missing, and I think it went into your backyard. Do you mind if I come in and we can go check it out? I may have been pretty dumb, but I wasn't that dumb. There was no way in hell I was letting this stranger into my house, especially with my little sister there. She was my first thought. Sure, I didn't want to have any harm fall on me, but she was my sister, and it was my job to keep her safe. I should have closed the door right then and there, but once again I went with a less safe but still not totally stupid route. Well, the gate should be unlocked. If you want to go check the backyard, you can. I promptly closed the door. Now, of course, I was very curious if there was actually a stray dog in my backyard. Dogs are pretty great. Even with the weird guy being around, I was pretty interested to see how his search in the backyard went. I decided to go check the back window and see if there actually was a dog, and if so, if the man would catch it. Now, at this point, I'm sure you've figured out that there was no dog. When I looked out the back window, I could see almost the entire yard, including the gate. The man wasn't there. This was a mere seconds after I had closed the door on him. I waited for a few minutes, but he never showed up. After another 5 minutes, there was another knock on the door. This time I was much more wary, and I didn't like this guy showing up. I was pretty tired of the whole ordeal, but I still hadn't fully grasped the situation. I kept the chain lock on the door and cracked it open. "Did you find your dog?" Again, I can't remember his facial features, so I can't really recall his expression, but I remember his tone was a bit desperate as well as annoyed. "No, I looked all over the yard and I couldn't find him. I have a picture in my car if you want to just take it, just in case you see him." No, no more. I still didn't understand abduction, but I certainly wasn't going to go anywhere outside of the house with a stranger. I told him that he could leave the picture in the mailbox and we'd keep an eye out, once again promptly closing the door. What followed is what really creeps me out to this day. Looking back, I was freaked out that I had come that close to exposing my sister and myself to danger, but this scared the shit out of me. Suddenly there was more knocking on my door. Not the screen door separating the door. The door itself. Like I mentioned previously, the screen door was locked, and unless that was open, it was impossible to knock on the door itself. It freaked me the fuck out, and I took my sister to my bedroom and crept back out to the kitchen, where I could see out onto the front yard. I saw the man quickly getting back into his car, while my saint of a next-door neighbor, Joan, stood on her front lawn smoking and watching him intently. It took a long time for me to add it all up, and honestly, I'd forgotten about it for a long time. When I finally remembered it all, I could barely believe my own memories. I'm still debating with myself to actually tell my parents now. I wouldn't want to unnecessarily upset them, but maybe it's an important story to tell my 2 younger sisters, one of whom is getting married soon, just as a life lesson. If anyone has any advice, I would love to hear it. I grew up in Wolverhampton in the West Midlands, UK. I was 12 years old, and let's just say I didn't have the easiest of upbringings. I was smoking, drinking, and staying out late around this time of my life. So I was bunking off school. My mom was at work, and it was late morning time around 11 a.m. I wanted to buy some cigarettes, but as I was well under the legal age was 16 at this time, I had to hang around outside the shop and ask strangers if they would take my money and purchase them for me. About 1.5 miles from my house, there was a little shop called the Spar. It was on a fairly busy road. A row of hedges lined one side, with a gap that led into the field beyond, and houses on the opposite side. So I was standing maybe 10 paces from the shop, waiting for people to walk past so I could ask them to purchase my cigarettes. I usually second-guessed if they would be willing just by how they looked. I asked a lady, maybe mid-40s, shoulder-length blonde hair and black business trousers. Looked like she smoked, but she said no. I asked a guy, maybe mid-50s, shaved brown hair. He was wearing blue jeans and a white t-shirt. He ignored me. At this point, I was getting pretty desperate, and decided upon asking anybody that came by. Then I see a rather disheveled-looking man coming up the road towards me, past the row of hedges. He was wearing dirty dark brown suit trousers, and a buttoned-up dark brown, but not the same shade, dirty velvet jacket. He had a black bowler kind of hat on, and he kind of limped a little as he walked. As he got closer to me, and I was trying to suss out if he looked like the type that would possibly purchase a 12-year-old cigarettes, I noticed that he was probably homeless, and possibly in his late 50s or early 60s. I figured that he probably smoked, so it couldn't hurt to ask him. As he approached me, I gave the usual line. "Excuse me, mate, would you please go into that shop and get some fags for me?" He stopped and thought for a second and then said, "How old are you?" I lied. "I'm 15, almost 16. And then he said, "Alright, which ones do you want?" and held out a really dirty hand. I gave him my money and asked him to get me 10 sovereign. I had the exact change. He goes into the shop and I'm waiting outside excited. I'm finally getting my cigarettes and can go home and chill out before I have to leave the house again to make it look like I've just got home from school. He comes out and gives me 20. I'm miffed to say the least, and say, "But I only gave you enough money for 10. I start panicking because I don't have any extra money on me to give him. At this point, he hooks my arm in his, very tightly holding my arm, very firmly to his side, and starts to walk back towards the hedge-lined road, all while he's telling me how I could make up for not having the extra money for the cigarettes. I'm kind of stunned at this point, and my mind is blank. I guess I was in some kind of a shock. He leads me through the gap in the hedges and into the field, all while talking non-stop. We're still briskly walking with my arm locked in his. He's telling me how I can come to his house and help him fix the roof tiles. I'm still in silent shock. The field is huge, and I can see it leads into more and more fields. I can hear the cars behind me getting more distant. I can't see any houses for miles. There's only fields. He's still talking, but I'm not taking in what he's saying. My mind starts to race. I finally realize that something about this isn't quite right, and I have to get away immediately. As he's still walking, holding my arm, I suddenly and violently pull back with my arm straight. It slides out of his arm very quickly, and he goes flying forwards and lands in a heap on the floor. I take one big step backwards. I'm terrified at this point, but still in shock. I can't even speak. He's laying on the ground, groaning and holding his leg, like he's in a lot of pain. "Why'd you do that for? You really hurt me. Help me up." He's holding his leg and holding his hand out for me to help him up. I'm frozen. My mind is racing so fast. I'm looking at this disheveled man right in the eye laying on the ground, groaning like he's in pain. But something about this situation just doesn't feel right to me. My gut was telling me to run, not to help him up. I bought you those cigarettes, didn't I? I helped you out. Why'd you do this? You've hurt me. Help me up. I take another step backwards, all the while looking into his green eyes. All of a sudden he stops groaning and asking for me to help him up. He points his finger at me, looking me right in the eye, and says, "You're a smart girl." It was like an electric shock ran through my body. I turn and run. I don't look back, I just run as fast as I can. When I've gotten off the hedge-lined road and turned into the next road, I slow down as I'm out of breath. I start bawling my eyes out, and I'm shaking uncontrollably. I keep checking behind me, catch my breath, and don't stop running until I get home. Least to say, I was terrified I'd bump into that man again, and I never tried to buy cigarettes from that shop ever again. I'm a 30-year-old woman living in Texas, and I've met my fair share of creeps, but what happened to me yesterday takes the cake. I don't drive, and I work in another city, so I have to take the bus to and from work, using mostly the same stops on a daily basis. I just started using public transportation last year, so I'm mostly pretty comfortable with it by now. This makes yesterday's experience all the more unnerving. I had gone to the store after work for some soda, so I had a reusable bag with two 2-liters in one hand and my purse in the other. Approaching the bus stop, I saw a woman sitting inside. It's one of the shelter types, and while I'm normally very shy and won't sit down if someone is in there, I considered it, because I was feeling fairly sick and my feet hurt after being on them all day. That idea quickly disappeared when I got closer and could hear her muttering to herself. I did a quick glance over as I walked past, and I could see she had bags spread out over that side of the bench, and her shoes were off. I concluded she was probably homeless, and since her muttering to herself definitely put me on guard, I walked past the stop to maybe 2 yards away or so, and set the reusable bag down. Uncomfortable, I pull out my phone and begin to text my best friend to tell her. This is about the time when I start noticing what she's saying. Things like, "Don't call me sweetie, I'll fucking murder you." Okay. Hackles raised even more, and I'm so curious to take a peek over. I figure it's probably best not to risk antagonizing her at all, as I don't want her to turn her attention onto me. I keep messaging my friend, and the lady is muttering the entire time. Things such as, "Don't call me sweetie, don't call me honey, don't call me anything." She's also saying things I can't quite catch, but one I did was, "I'll wrap my hands around your throat and fucking kill you." At this point I start to think maybe I should nope it out of there. But the bus is set to arrive any minute, and even though the station is just down the street, I'm reluctant to try for it, because I just really want to get home. Stupid, I know, but she hadn't done anything to make me think she'd even noticed I existed yet. Around this time, I hear her begin saying things about a fat slut. Now this certainly alarms me, as I'm not a slim woman, and slut is fairly gender specific. But what sends shivers down my spine is when I hear, "Your phone doesn't scare me." Clearly she's speaking about and to me now, as I've had my phone out since I got there. Just as I'm about to grab my bag, I look to the side, and she's now just outside the shelter, staring at me with a look of intense hatred. There's still maybe 1.5 yards between us, but it's not enough to make me risk leaning over to pick up that bag and possibly give her an opening. She starts again with how I've got to stop calling her sweetie, but now I can hear the other stuff I was missing before. Things about how she wasn't going to fuck me, she wasn't going to worship me, I wasn't going to cost her morals or her relationship with God, and all kinds of crazy shit. I'm looking at this woman completely terrified as she keeps talking about murdering me and putting her hands around my neck. She sits back down, and I, completely idiotically, am frozen to the spot. I feel like I don't dare even lean over, even now that she's a safe distance away. Also, this is taking place next to a very busy road that directly connects to a highway, so I think it gave me a false sense of security. She keeps muttering. I slowly come to the conclusion that my bus isn't coming, and am now near tears. And then she gets up again. She's much more vehement now, and I'm completely terrified, the most scared I've been in my life. I see a man crossing the street, and as he steps onto the sidewalk, I take a deep breath and hope for the best, lean over and grab my bag, and nope the fuck out of there, watching over my shoulder the entire way. I walk down to the next bus stop and immediately call the police, who connect me to the right department, and I tell them what happened. Although my physical description isn't very good, since as I told them I hardly even glanced at her, because I was worried about antagonizing her. Not long after that, a family member happened by and gave me a ride, so I didn't have to bother with the bus at all. Also, my brother lives in an apartment complex just down the road from that stop, and he told me she'd been sleeping there for about a week. He had had a minor encounter with her last night, so I guess they didn't find her. But she was gone this morning, and still gone this afternoon, so maybe somebody else complained? I hope so, because not only do I fear for the safety of people who come into contact with her, I did legitimately fear for my safety throughout the encounter. I feel sorry for her, and hope she can get the help she needs as well. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave feedback in the comments below, as well as perhaps like, share, or subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have a personal story that you'd like to submit, or you'd like to just send me a message, links to all of my social media will be in the description for the video below. This includes my Gmail, Twitter, and Facebook accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the theme of the story is, if it has any, the name of the story, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If you're curious at all about the music used in this video, the music is always listed in the description below, in the order which it appears. I also have links to the artists and list the tracks by name, just in case you want to find more of their work. Last but not least, if you have any criticism, please be sure to leave it in the comments below, as I'm always looking for new ways to improve the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.